Hello and welcome to ChatterBox, the show where we literally chat boxing. I'm Josh Denzel and I'm joined by my regular sparring partner, Carl Frampton. Carl, we've got to kick this off. I saw you at the Joe Joyce fight on Saturday. I'm not sure anyone saw that coming.
No, I don't think a lot of people did. Maybe Team Zhang saw it coming, but I think that the narrative and everybody kind of at ringside and behind the scenes were, it's almost like it's not going to be an easy fight, but Joe will wear him down and maybe force a stoppage later on. I think that's the majority of the people I spoke to thought that was going to happen. But Zhang surprised not only us, but obviously Joe Joyce as well, and he was brilliant. He was really, really good. But Joe just looked like, I don't know, it looked like there was something up. He didn't look himself. It looked like he was really struggling with his southpaw stance. But I still don't think it's the end of the road for Joe. I still think there's more to come.
You know what? We're gonna break down that fight and we're gonna dig deep into the heavyweight division as a whole a bit later in the show. But before that, I want to introduce Alex Krassyuk. You know, those who don't know, he's Oleksandr Usyk's promoter and one of the nicest guys in the game. How you doing, brother?
All good, Josh. Hi, how you doing?
Not too bad. All the better now you're on the show. I just want to kind of get a steer on your last few weeks because you seem to have been a busy man.
Well, if you are involved in boxing, you have to be busy. Otherwise, someone else who is busy instead of you will be ahead. So it's normal to stay active and to look for some opportunities for your fighters.
Do you know what? It's. I don't want to go over old ground because I think we've spoken about it a lot. That fight with Tyson Fury, it kind of has been done to the death, really. But just to know, are we ever going to see it happen? Because there's rumors and rumblings going on about something happening.
I would love to see it as a boxing fan, as Usyk's promoter. I would love to make it happen. As just a normal Ukrainian, I would love my compatriot to become the undisputed champion in the second weight division. So it's from our side, it's only plus. We know that Tyson Fury is a complex personality, and it's probably not a surprise for anyone, and we can see it on his behavior within last probably 7 or 10 years. Yes, he is the champion. Yes, he has the right to do things that he wants to do. But at the end of the day, he is a professional boxer, and his main assignment is to perform for the boxing fans. So that is why I think if this fight does not take place, that would be one of the biggest mistakes that Tyson Fury could ever make in professional boxing career.
There was a time when they met face to face in the ring, and there was all the kind of histrionics, and they were screaming at each other and at each other that I thought they'd fight each other for free. Let's take a look at when they first met.
Me and you getting it, little sucker, rabbit! I'm gonna write you off. I already done one Ukrainian Klitschko, didn't I? And I'll do you as well, gappy teeth. You ugly little man! You ugly little man!
I mean, it's the talking's fantastic, but when it doesn't materialize as a boxing fan, you know, we've been there, we've done it, we've seen these fights built up for so long, and they don't ever happen. But let's hope they do. But you know what? It might have actually blessed us with maybe a better selection of fights, because there's rumors of a super series boxing heavyweights in Saudi Arabia this December, Usyk against Fury, Wilder AJ, and the winners then fighting each other back in Saudi. Have you heard about this? Because Eddie Hearn and Malik Scott, they suggest that talks are happening, but Tyson Fury has gone, no, that's rubbish.
So we talk. Let's say we assume Joe Joyce is fighting back Zhilei Zhang in the rematch. It's just talks. Let's say Anthony Joshua is fighting Joe Joyce. It's just talks. Wilder is fighting Usyk. Only talks, only rumors. same thing. No commitments, no offers, no obligations. So this is just the not even the planning. This is just the assumption of something that might happen. Of course, that level of boxing night would be something absolutely extraordinary, something that never happened before. That will just that will be the peak. Rumble in the Jungle, Thriller in Manila. It all would stay in the past after this event takes place. But at this stage, there is nothing certain about it. There is there is no date, there is no contract signed, or even memorandums of understanding. So we cannot just rely on it as something serious unless it's signed on the paper.
How far away do you think that is potentially, or is it in the really, really early stages? And is it easy to work with an Eddie Hearn? And is Tyson Fury the one stumbling block there? Because it seems like those guys keep coming, we want to fight each other.
From my perspective, from my experience, I claim that it's very easy. So AJ is not a very complicated person to deal with. Deontay Wilder, Shelley Finkel, is a very reasonable person. By the way, we got in touch with him a couple of weeks ago, first time in 10 years, and we had quite a long conversation reminding all the things we went through. So he's also very reasonable, and I don't think it will be a big challenge for anyone to make a deal with him. Oleksandr Usyk and his team are known to be the easiest people to deal with in the world of boxing. So there's only one thing still pending. And it's a complex person, complex personality who would go back and forth, play his games, trying to squeeze as much money as possible, because that was the reason why Usyk called him Greedy Belly.
So if this tournament does happen, I imagine there's talk of it happening in November, December, really at the end of the year. So what does Usyk do in the meantime? There's talk over here of a potential fight with Daniel Dubois. Does that maybe look like the next move for you guys?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we are working on now. And I had conversations with George Warren yesterday, day before yesterday, this morning, and we're going to have one tomorrow morning to try to find a solution. And if we don't find the solution, the difference between the Tyson Fury and Dubois is that this agreement is regulated by the government rules, the regulations. So if we don't find the solution and the contract is not signed, at the end of the day, we might have the purse bid.
Yeah.
And the winner of the purse bid is the one to organize the event. Very easy. That's why we have the deadline set by WBA, which is May the 3rd. If we do not deliver anything signed by that time, the purse bid will be announced. Yes, Daniel Dubois is our next objective. We have to comply with the rules. Usyk has to face the WBA mandatory, who is the first in the rotation line, and that's it actually.
You know what? It's interesting. Usyk, I know he stopped his camp just after the Fury fight broke down, but we've seen a little bit of footage of him back in the gym. He seems to be enjoying himself. Let's take a look. Now I know why he moves so well in the ring.
That is the reason why media is not allowed in the training camp. Most important thing is not dancing. The most important thing is the spirit that is in the training camp. Well, that actually shows how positive the work is, because the work is really hard, and if you stay positive, you just cope with it much easier.
When you see clips like that, and you see his, and sorry, Josh, when you see clips like that, and you see his interviews and stuff, and it's really hard not to like Oleksandr Usyk. like even if you're a fan of Tyson Fury or maybe his future opponents, whoever they may be, everybody has a soft spot for Usyk, I think.
Very charismatic person. This is number one. Very open-hearted person. Number two. Very kind. Number three. Whatever he thinks is what he say. What he says is what is actually on his mind. He's not playing. He's not trying to cheat anyone. He is who he is, like a very simple person, very close to the earth, walking, stepping on the earth, not flying in the sky. You can't do anything but love this guy.
No doubt. Now, we touched a little bit on that potential Dubois fight. We're going to be looking at the heavyweight landscape, as well as looking back to Joyce versus Zhang, and accessing the whole kind of heavyweight division as well. So we'll see you in part two. Thanks for coming on. Hello and welcome back to ChatterBox. Before the break, we mentioned a potential fight between Oleksandr Usyk and Daniel Dubois. Alex, how are talks progressing with that one?
We are working, we are putting our efforts to make it happen. And at the end of the day, if we don't find the solution, we have the purse bid procedure. That's the difference between a Fury fight and Dubois fight. With Fury, there is no procedure. With Dubois, there is very strict and very simple. If we don't make a deal, we go for the purse bid. Whoever wins is the one who stages the fight.
If that does come into effect and a purse bid has to happen and Team Usyk win the purse bid, where does the fight take place?
According to the purse bid, you have to put at least 3 dates and 3 possible locations. So if I was to bid this evening or this afternoon, I would say Middle East, Poland, and the UK.
Poland would be really interesting. Obviously, we know the relationship between the Polish and the Ukrainian people, and a lot of Ukrainians fleeing to Poland from the war and what's going on there. So I think that would be a really interesting place for the fight to take place.
Yes, I agree with you completely, and we will work with our partners in Poland. We will try to work out the possibility of staging that fight there. So this will be one of the options we will look at.
Ukrainian fans, they love to travel and they really support their fighters. Even at the AJ fight in Saudi, the second fight, it was, I think the arena was split almost 50-50 between UK fans and Ukrainian fans. They do get behind their fighters, don't they?
Well, I wouldn't say there were too many Ukrainians. There were just people from Saudi and from Middle East who love Usyk and who support him. But you are completely right. The venue was split like 50-50 between those two guys.
Carl, you're open and honest, and you know your boxing. Can you see Dubois posing any problems for Usyk?
It's hard. It's hard to make an argument for Dubois winning. I think what he does have is he's a big puncher. It's clear to see he can punch very hard, and he's a big athletic man, and he'll be a lot bigger than Usyk. I imagine he can punch harder than Usyk as well, but I just feel like Usyk's movement would be too much for him, and I think he would be frustrated by Usyk, and I think at some point there could even be a late stoppage on the card. I'm not saying that's definitely the way it happens, but I think most boxing fans would go along with what I'm saying, and it just looks like a task maybe too far. But you got to remember that Daniel Dubois is very, very young, and there's plenty of time for him to win a world title. And I imagine at some point in his career he's going to do that.
You know, with Daniel, he had an explosive start to his career. I think everyone enjoyed watching those, first round, second round, third round knockouts. But it was derailed slightly after he suffered that horrific eye injury in the defeat to Joe Joyce, which obviously kept him out of the ring for quite a while. We can actually take a look at that now.
Oh dear, it's the left eye and he's gone down. He's gone down with the jab right on that damaged left eye, and down he goes. And it could be that it's all over right here. He's had enough, he doesn't want any more. And Joe Joyce, by stoppage.
Carl, you said he took the knee. Change your mind on now, kind of everything.
No, I maybe went in a little bit harsh on him, but he did take a knee. Obviously, we know there was a lot of damage done to his eye, but he went down on his knee. I think he shouldn't have been put into that position and had to have made that decision himself. I think it should have been a decision that was made from his corner, either before that or while he's on his knee. You know what I mean? Throw the towel in then. The guy just took a knee. Didn't seem like there was a lot happened. It's clear that his eye is giving him a lot of trouble. And afterwards, obviously, we knew that there was a lot of damage to his eye. So when he's on his knee and a punch hasn't been thrown, I think the corner, that's when the towel should have come in. And it doesn't look as bad for Daniel Dubois, and he doesn't get as much criticism. But look, I understand why he done it, but I think I was maybe a little bit harsh at the time, but I regret the harshness of it, but I still think my point stands.
You know what? He bounced back from there. I think 4 straight KO victories since then, and then he had a massive scare in his last fight against Kevin Lerena. We'll have a little look at that there, and then we'll discuss it.
Both boxers are landing shots and Dubois down. 2. Dubois lands a crunching left hook in there. Yeah, great uppercut as well. Lorena's going. 1, 2. Howard Foster stops it.
Alex, talk to me. If this fight happens, we've heard Carl's opinion. Do you think Dubois has a chance of beating your man?
Of course. Otherwise, there would be no fight. He's the heavyweight. He's a young kid. He's strong like a rhinoceros, you know. He's very young and very hungry, motivated. His last fight was not a big luck for him because he suffered a severe injury of his knee, which was actually the reason of most of his knockdowns in the fight. I hope he recovered because Lorena is not a big puncher. Lorena is the former cruiserweight. Because I remember him, I tried to get him to fight Usyk at the beginning of Usyk's career. Only 3 or 4 times I was negotiating Lorena. Now he appears in heavyweights and he almost completed the big upset in London. But Daniel showed his heart, showed his character.
Before Dubois was being mentioned as a possible opponent for your man, it was Joe Joyce. He was firmly in the picture to be the next opponent. And then this happened. Let's take a look.
Oh, what a big shot! Big shot from Zhang! Joe Joyce in trouble! Foster looks at Joe Joyce, he stopped it. Zhilei Zhang has beaten Joe Joyce, whose unbeaten record is gone.
Talk to me, guys. What went wrong for Joe there?
He made a mistake. I remember Vitaly Klitschko, when he was an active boxer, used to say that defense is first thing in boxing. The second thing in boxing is good defense. And the third thing in boxing is perfect defense. So it means that 3 main things in boxing are defense, defense, and defense again. And Joe Joyce made a mistake by thinking his head is made of stone or made of rubber, made of wood or whatever, like a juggernaut, but it's not right. It's not a proper approach. You first have to think about how not to take punch and then how to land your punch. And this fight showed that no matter how good you are at taking punches, your skin, your eye, your bones are not that confident as you might be.
That's something that we all forgot about. I think we would all be easily mistaken, and Joe included, in thinking that everything just bounces off his head and it doesn't look like he can be hurt to the head. But that was obviously, it's wrong, and Zhang proved that. But something we never thought about was when Joe gets hit so often, what happens if he gets cut? What happens if his eye swells up and he can still take the shot? But what happens if these things? And it's something that we all kind of overlooked. But he get hit so clean against Zhang. And at times he looked lost. He looked like he didn't know how to handle a southpaw. And then you've got to kind of think. Obviously, he was maybe trying to prepare for a future fight with Usyk and a future fight with Fury. But when you see in hindsight how badly he dealt with a southpaw, I imagine that was happening in his camp as well, training with southpaws. So why was this match made? You know, you got to look at the matchmaker going, well, who decided to put Joe in with this big punching southpaw? And it's clear that he has issues with them.
Yeah, and pay attention at his weight, because his weight was probably a stone lower than he was in a previous fight.
Interesting. Alex, pleasure to have you on as always. Very interesting chat. That's all we've got time for. That's the end of part 2. But in part 3, we're going to be joined by the world-renowned fight sports broadcaster Ariel Helwani, who'll delve deeper into the heavyweight division and, of course, talk about some of the other big fights on the horizon. Hello and welcome back to part 3 of ChatterBox, where Carl and I are joined by legendary fight sports broadcaster Ariel Helwani. Welcome to ChatterBox, Ariel.
Legendary. Wow. I appreciate that. I was wondering if you guys were going to have me on after I, kind of squashed all of Carl's, rankings the last time we spoke and sort of embarrassed him with some of my hot takes. So I appreciate you guys having me on 4 months later.
Do you know what? It's the redemption arc for Carl. We're absolutely fine with it. Now,
I embarrass myself every day, Ariel, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's the usual thing for Carl. Now, we've already talked about Joe Joyce's shock defeat to Zhilei Zhang, but I'd like to get your take on it, Eric.
Oh my gosh, it was quite shocking. Actually, I rate Zhang pretty high. He trains not too far from where I live here, and I think he's super tough. Actually thought he may have won his last fight, and I was wondering if Joyce was looking past him. This was a very dangerous fight, a fight that some people thought he shouldn't have taken because he was so close to getting that really big fight next, whether it's against a Fury or Usyk, etc. And it just kind of felt to me like he was very relaxed. And I know he's a mild-mannered, soft-spoken guy, but I just didn't know if he was giving Zhang the proper respect going into this one. And then we saw what happened on Saturday, and I thought it was a virtuoso performance from Zhang. I said on Twitter, I think that version of Zhang beats the Anthony Joshua that we saw a few weeks ago at the O2. Joyce will be back, and I think he'll have some big fights on the horizon, but this is a massive step back for him on the verge of the biggest payday, the biggest fight of his career.
We focused a lot on Joyce and how he was going into the fight, what he did in the ring, but you got to give credit to Zhang, who really did announce himself as one of the main players in the heavyweight division just shy of his 40th birthday.
He was the B-side last week, and I felt like he was the star of the week. The press conferences, everything that he was doing was just very fun. The stuff that he was doing with you guys at BT was very fun as well. Big shout out to Big John. So all week long, it seemed like he was just owning the moment. And then the performance itself, I mean, the left hand was incredible. He's like a super heavyweight, but he looked like the faster, crisper boxer. I think most of us were expecting Joyce to be that guy. And so, yeah, I mean, he really owned it. And now, to your point, now he's setting himself up for a big fight. We suspect Dubois Usyk, but does he slide in there and fight one of these, big names next? Is he fighting a Joshua? Is he fighting one of these guys? I don't see why not. He's a guy with a large following who comes from China. Obviously, anyone who comes from there, especially with his stature and size, could do some big business. So he has set himself up for a massive back end of 2023.
You know, when you look at the big names in the heavyweight division now, you've got Zhang at 39, Wilder's 37, Usyk's 36, Fury's 34, Ruiz 33. I think AJ is also 33. It's not a young man's game at the top anymore.
No, it isn't. But there's still, there's still opportunities for people to make some noise. And honestly, at heavyweight, historically, you probably have a bit of a longer shelf life. Of course, George Foreman, 45 years old, won the heavyweight title way back when, I think in 1994 off the top of my head. So you typically are able to stick around a little longer at heavyweight despite the big shots that they're taking. And for me right now, it's wide open. If we get into the Tank Garcia stuff, like the heavyweights are on notice. It's embarrassing what has happened with the heavyweight division. Like they were right there to bring it all the way back with Fury and Usyk, and the way they fumbled that. And it's no disrespect to Dubois or anyone else, but the fight that we wanted to see that was at the goal line, to steal a phrase here in America, an analogy, the fact that they fumbled that is absolutely embarrassing in my opinion. And everyone involved should be embarrassed and ashamed of themselves. So there's all big players, and they're all kind of, in their 30s, in their primes. And right now they're not making the big fights. Whether it's Joshua, whether it's Fury, whether it's Usyk, all these guys, they're not making the big fights, and that's embarrassing. And they should look to the women, and they should look to the lightweights as examples as to how you should make the big fights and give the people what they want.
You sound very passionate on that, Ariel, and I am too. I think you're absolutely right, and you've hit the nail on the head that these fights, for the sake of boxing, should be taking place. But the Fury and Usyk fight in particular, that was the one that kind of was a bit of a sickener for everybody. I thought that it was done. I thought that fight was definitely going to happen. I know you says everybody's to blame to some extent, but who you pointing the finger at really in that fight falling through?
Oh, I'm not going to fall for your tricks, Carl. You want the click. I wasn't in those rooms, and so that's why you want. Helwani blames Fury. Helwani blames Usyk. I don't want that smoke from the big boys. But the truth is, I feel like everyone is to blame. By the way, same thing with Spence and Crawford. I feel like everyone is to blame with that one too. That one
is that going to happen?
I don't know. Look, I can guarantee you this weekend there's going to be a lot of people watching Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, aged 28 and 24, who willed networks and promoters into a room and said, we're not leaving until you make this super fight. There was every obstacle imaginable to not make this fight, right? The competing networks, the competing promoters, all that stuff, the undefeated records, their ages, everything imaginable. And they said no. And I actually give Ryan the most amount of credit for that one, for making it happen, but that's besides the point. I bet you there's going to be top fighters, Spence, Crawford, Usyk, Fury, that are going to have FOMO, that are going to say, this should be us. We want this. We want the bright lights of Vegas or London or anywhere else. We should be taking these fights. We should be making these fights happen. They're going to feel like they dropped the ball, like they're on the outside looking in. I bet you this is going to ignite some of these talks again. Does it ultimately lead to a Spence Crawford? It should. Who else are they fighting? Yeah. There's literally no one else on the planet that we want to see those two guys fight, and yet they're not making the fight happen. It drives me insane.
Ariel, I spent a fair bit of time with Devin Haney, a man who knows both those fighters you mentioned very well. He couldn't pick a winner. How do you see that fight going?
God, I cannot wait. This is the fight of the year. And I said it was the fight of the year before even we thought that, Usyk and Fury was going to happen, all that stuff. I cannot wait for this fight for so many reasons. It's hard. My head is saying Davis. My heart is saying Ryan. Typically, Davis likes to start a little slow. I suspect that Ryan Garcia is going to try to start fast. Obviously, he has the height and reach advantage. Early portions of this fight, like rounds 1 through 4, I suspect he will do very well. How does he do in the later rounds? Does Gervonta figure him out, download the information, and maybe knock him out? It's possible, but I'm going to be there in Las Vegas because I couldn't let King Ryan down. I will be there. So after he potentially knocks out Davis, look for me in the front row next to Oscar, next to the Golden Boy, and we might have a nice little moment there. Maybe I'll jump into the ring and we'll hug it out. I don't know. It's still TBD.
I have a take. I have a take on this fight, and I've been asked recently about who do I think wins, and I think Tank is probably the favorite. Tank is he's the most explosive fighter that we have since maybe Manny Pacquiao was pretty explosive, but even you go further back to like a prime Mike Tyson, that's when we talk about how explosive Tank is. But he does start slow, and at times he is a little bit lazy. He landed that unbelievable uppercut on Leo Santa Cruz, maybe one of the shots of the century so far. It was an unbelievable shot. But Leo had maybe stole a few rounds on him by just being busier and outworking him. And Leo isn't on Gervonta Davis's level. And I think coaching and their coaches in the corner is going to be really important in this fight. I imagine that Ryan Garcia's tactics will be to punch fast and to punch long and not get caught in that middle distance. And when you're close, you hold on or spoil. But that middle distance is the real danger zone for him. And Joe Goosen in his corner, who I rate as one of the great coaches, I think he will have a very, very important role to play in this fight.
We've got a huge next couple of months of boxing coming up, and one of the fights I want to talk about is Rakhimov against Joe Cordina for the IBF super featherweight title. How do you see that one going? I know Joe Cordina's he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder about losing that belt.
I love that fight. The next 2 months are going to be great, and Cordina's a lot of fun. Dangerous puncher, a lot of power. I know you said he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's fighting back home, so you suspect that he will rise to the occasion there, and the scenes are going to be great. Man, I would love to go to one of those fights. Might go to the Katie Taylor fight next month. That should be a lot of fun. That should be historic as well. I mean, I'm just so anxious to go to one of these like European. It just seems different, even more so than in Las Vegas.
Can I just say this, Ariel?
Yes.
If you go to a Katie Taylor fight in Dublin, first ever professional fight, and it's a big fight. It's a massive fight. She's gone up a weight division against the best in the weight above. I think quite possibly, and I've been involved in some big atmospheres, and I've been ringside at events with massive atmospheres. That could be, for me, the best atmosphere I've ever been involved in. That's
Wow.
what I'm expecting.
And it's not even happening at Croke Park, which is where we were hoping it was going to happen. 3 Arena. I've only been to Dublin once. I've only been to 3 Arena once, and that was for Conor McGregor's return to Dublin in 2014 against Diego Brandao, the only time he ever fought in the UFC in Ireland. And till this day, guys, that's the greatest atmosphere that I've ever experienced. Any arena, any venue, any stadium, doesn't matter if it's boxing, MMA, pro wrestling, basketball, whatever. And so you saying that kind of gives me chills. And I believe it because of how she is, beloved and respected and admired and idolized in Ireland. So, and by the way, we were talking about not making the big fights. They tried to make the Serrano fight. It was happening. She withdraws. What does she do? She doesn't wait. She doesn't take a tune-up. She doesn't take an easy fight. She goes up to 140 and tries to become undisputed champion over there. I mean, against Chantel Cameron, who's super tough as well. She doesn't have to do that. So yeah, I love everything about that. And there's a bunch of, Lee Wood coming up again. There's just a bunch of big fights in Europe in particular. Not Fury Usyk though. Not Fury Usyk. It's supposed to be next week, Fury Usyk, for goodness sakes.
I know, it's outrageous. This is boxing for you. This is why we love and hate the sport at the same time. Now, one fighter that I really can't fail to mention, who really wasn't hanging around last week, was Denzel Bentley, who produced this spectacular 45-second knockout against Kieran Smith. Let's take a look.
This is another tricky contest tonight against a very tall, rangy opponent who boxes well on that back foot. Good shot! What a punch that
Really
was.
good left hand from Denzel Bentley and a right. Kieran Smith is down. It's all over inside a minute.
He's a fighter that I think he wanted another world title shot, but he's happy to bow to, I guess, public pressure from us boxing fans and sports journalists to fight Hamza Shiraz next. I think that will be an incredible fight of 2 up-and-coming ferocious boxers.
Yeah, 45 seconds that was. Was that 45 seconds? The prestigious British middleweight title. Very impressive celebration, very impressive power. A lot of exciting youngsters. It was a fun card. I was watching you guys on Saturday. Shout out to Big Steve Bunce. Tremendous stuff. Shout out to you, Carl, as well. You look very small next to Steve, just for the record. I don't know if anyone ever told you that.
He always looks
big.
I don't know if they do that on purpose. Can they give you like a milk crate or something to stand on?
We need a box.
Geez Louise.
We need a box. I've asked for it so many times. And then to bring in guests like Dillian White was standing beside me. I was sandwiched between Dillian White and Steve Bunce. It just looked ridiculous.
But the coverage is great, and the card was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it very much.
Before we make Carl cry, you know what? Let's take it to part 3. We run out of time for this part, but after the break, we're going to be discussing a potential crossover in fights in terms of boxing and UFC, and we're going to be discussing whether YouTube boxing really is the future of the sport. Stay tuned. We'll be back for part 4. Hello and welcome back to the final part of ChatterBox, where I'm delighted to say we're still joined by Ariel Helwani. And between Ariel and Alex, we've kind of picked the heavyweight division apart. But before we move on to some of the other great fights that we've got coming up, I'd like to tap into your other fight sports knowledge, Ariel. Okay, we've seen a few crossover fights between boxing and UFC over the last few years, but one fight that's been muted is Tyson Fury against Ngannou. Is that a serious proposition?
I mean, I think that Francis really wants it. It doesn't seem like there's any real momentum right now behind that fight. I think he has, maybe resigned to the fact that he could fight maybe a Dillian White or a Deontay Wilder. To me, the best fight for him, if he really wants to like make a splash and jump 2 feet first into the deep end, go with Wilder. Wilder is the closest thing that we have to an MMA heavyweight, meaning he's a little wild, he's not very technical, and they're just going to swing for the fences. Very tough fight. He'll be a massive underdog going into this fight, but that to me is the fight that he should target. I think Tyson would be too fast, too technical, just too difficult for the first go round as a boxer. Yeah. So that's the one. And honestly, I wouldn't even hate if he tried to go for a Dillian White or so. But he told me last time we spoke that he was shooting for summer or late summer or early fall to make this debut. Let's see what happens.
I met him in Vegas when I was training for Taylor McCreary fight, a couple of fights before I packed it in. And we trained out in the UFC Performance Center. And Francis was a lovely big guy, and he spent a lot of time talking to us and taking photographs and stuff. But I got a photograph with him, and I put my arm around him. And do you know the muscles that run down the back each side of your spine? Can't remember the name of them, but I literally gripped one with the whole size of my hand. Like he's a monster of a man. I couldn't believe the size of him.
Yeah, he is a beast. He hasn't fought in a while now, and he's coming off of knee surgery, and he's no spring chicken as well. So I think a lot of people are anxious. You know, there were 2 big free agents in MMA. One, Francis Ngannou, the other one, Nathan Diaz. And I think a lot of people were wondering, who would strike first. Both of them interested in boxing. We found out last week, Nathan Diaz, Jake Paul, somewhat of a shocking left turn because it seemed like Diaz was going to fight Logan Paul. So I think now there's a little bit of pressure on Francis to make something happen and not lose momentum from when he left the UFC in January.
Is it too much of a stretch? Because we know UFC fighters have good boxing skills, good stand-up game. Is it too much of a step for maybe some boxers to try and step into the octagon, or is it just such a complex sport that it would be too much of a jump?
It's too. I'm gonna answer that now. It's too much of a step. It's okay, and this is why you always have UFC guys and the MMA guys coming to boxing rather than the other way around, because it just doesn't work. We obviously the MMA guys they can all box a little bit, and some better than others, but there's so much technical difficulties in MMA. If you try to put a boxer who's learned how to punch, never kicked, never grappled, never wrestled, if you put him in the octagon or a cage somewhere, I'm saying this as a boxer, it doesn't end well.
No, and we saw it once. The most famous example was James Toney in 2010 when he fought Randy Couture, and he didn't even know how to tap. Like that's how, fish out of water he was. He was just like tapping the air. He was so confused about that. So, look, everything is different, right? It's so much harder. And the MMA fighters don't fare very well when they cross over, but it's even harder for the boxer to cross over. Everything from, like your stance to the foot movement to all the different things that you have to deal with, takedowns, knees, elbows, all that stuff and more. But you could even boil it down to this. Like if I'm an orthodox fighter, my left foot is forward, right? If I'm an orthodox wrestler, my right foot is forward. And so even that alone changes, right? Like in wrestling, it's completely different, the stance. And so that's why you see so many more MMA fighters changing stances freely as opposed to boxers and having success doing so, kicks, all that stuff. So yeah, I don't think that you'll see a lot of big name boxers. You know, there's a reason why Tony, you know, was over the hill when he done it, and no one else has tried since. It's too hard.
The biggest name in the YouTube boxing, influencer boxing scene is Jake Paul. We mentioned that Nate Diaz fight. It was a bit of a left turn, as you mentioned, but how do you see that fight going? Because Nate has often been touted as the boxing guy within UFC.
As you mentioned, he has touted himself as like one of the best, if not the best boxers in the UFC, has sparred the likes of Andre Ward throughout his entire career. And Andre speaks very highly of his boxing skills as well. Jake's back is against the wall. I think if he loses this, you know, there's maybe just one fight left for him, and that's KSI. And who knows if there's going to be a ton of interest, even if he gets, you know, if he gets starched in this one, is there going to be a ton of interest? And even for Nate, there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders, not just the size, not just the fact that he hasn't had an official boxing fight in his entire life, a pro bout. I mean, he's got a lot of pride. He's got a ton of pride. If he loses to the guy who just lost to Tommy Fury, with all due respect to the YouTuber, to the Disney kid, it's going to be a tough pill for him to swallow, going back to Stockton with that loss on his record in his debut. So I think both guys are going to bring it. I think we're going to see a very good version of both guys. I just wonder about not boxing before for Diaz, the size difference as well. And I wonder for Paul, like where he's at mentally coming off that loss. Does he still have that fire, or once he's tasted defeat, has the kind of fire to remain undefeated and be this guy who's going to fight Canelo? Has that gone away as well?
Carl, I know you're not the biggest fan of the so-called YouTube boxers, so close your eyes while we run this VT. But this is what happened when Tommy Fury fought Jake Paul and got his hand raised with a victory.
Tommy Fury!
The biggest win of Tommy Fury's young career. The grudge match is won by Tommy Fury. Jake Paul beaten for the first time. Look at him celebrating. It means so much to Tommy Fury.
What did you make of that fight, Ariel?
You know, it was a solid fight. It was a solid show. I enjoyed it. I think I didn't have the highest expectations, right? Like I wasn't expecting world-class fighting. And so I think some people who don't watch boxing week in and week out are like, oh gosh, these guys are making so much noise. They're so popular. Let me sit back and watch. And they were like, that wasn't exactly what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting Spence Crawford. I wasn't expecting something like that. And so it was what I thought it was going to be. I thought the right man won. I thought Tommy just stuck to the game plan and kept it simple.
You know what? You had, I guess, what turned out to be a brilliant world title fight between Badou Jack and Ilunga Makabu that was relegated to the undercard of Fury versus Jake Paul. Is that the way that the sport is going? And do we have to embrace it?
I don't think Badou Jack has any problems with that as well. They got their shine. They got their moment. To me, this is the thing that I always say. They're not taking anyone's spot. They're creating spots, right? Look at what happened to Amanda Serrano once she teamed up with Jake Paul. Look at a young guy like Ashton Silva, who's part of MVP now, and they're taking him under his wing, and I suspect will fight on this Nate Diaz card as well. It isn't like, let's say Nottingham Forest, my favorite club, signed an influencer and put him in the starting 11. He would be taking someone's slot. And I'm not talking about Jesse Lingard, of course. I'm talking about an actual influencer. Just kidding, Jesse. I love you. The point is, there's an actual number of slots, right? There's a quota. In boxing, there's no quota. You could have 1,000 cards. You could have 1,000 fights on a card. And so to me, as long as they're creating other slots for other people, it's all good. There's no harm, no foul. They're fighting people who are at their level, who, they're not getting killed in there. They're not getting totally embarrassed in there. I really don't have a problem with it. I only think that they're raising the awareness and making the spotlight of boxing bigger.
I want to go off topic here a little bit, Ariel, because you just mentioned Nottingham Forest. And I've watched your podcast from time to time, and I see a Forest badge, their crest, on your kind of bookshelf or whatever it is. What's the connection with Nottingham Forest?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked, Carl. I mean, my dear Nottingham Forest, tough times, not going to lie. I'm a little bit nervous about this whole relegation situation. But the truth is, I was a bit of a free agent. If we really want the truth, Molly McCann, Meatball Molly, made me become. She kind of forced me to become an Everton fan, right? And to be nice, I adopted Everton as a club, but I never really liked them or felt a connection with them. I wasn't a big fan. I never even watched a single game of theirs. And so this summer, my boys are really into soccer. They adore soccer, football. And we decided we need to pick a squad. And I was looking at all the teams, and I love the Forest logo, and I love the Forest story. 23 years, and then I started reading about Brian Clough and all the legends over there, and they finally get promoted. And I said, this is my team. And then I just so happened to be in the UK in late August, because I was there to cover WWE for BT Sport, and I went to Man City Forest, and the club presented me with my own kit. They made a whole presentation outside Etihad Stadium, and I was like, oh, now I'm all in. And people joke, and they don't believe that I'm all in. I'm telling you guys, I watch every single match, beginning to end. Look at this. I want to show you something right here. I have a kit signed by the entire club that they sent to me. I am all in. I watch everything. Brennan Johnson is my favorite. Morgan Gibbs-White, I could tell you all about them. Stevie Cooper, the man. But it's tough sledding these days, Carl. I have fallen in love with this team. And people have asked me, am I going to stick around? Am I going to still be on the bandwagon if they get relegated? 1,000%. I'm all in. I got my EFL championship schedule. I'm in. But I want them to stay up, and they've had a lot of chances. So that's the story, really. I have fallen in love with this team and this club and the city ground and the fans and the history. I just don't want them to get relegated. But if they do, for the record, I will stick around.
Right, Ariel, between supporting Nottingham Forest and these big fights not getting made, it's going to be a tough few months coming up. But while we're here, let's keep it happy. And I want to know your top 5 pound-for-pound heavyweight fighters in the world. Let's go.
Oh, okay, we're just sticking to heavyweight, right? So I'm going to go with Fury 1, Usyk 2. I'm going to go Deontay 3. Putting me on the spot here. AJ. I'll go AJ 4. And I know that might be controversial. AJ below Wilder. And do we go with Dubois or do we go with Zhang? What do you think? What do you think, Carl? Do I go with that? I'm going to give a shout out to Dubois.
I would say Zhang because of the way he beat Joyce, and I think he should have got the nod over Hrgovic as well.
Okay, fine. All right, you sold me. I'm going with Zhang. So in conclusion, Fury, Usyk, Wilder, just because I know Joshua lost to Usyk, and so that might not be fair to put him. But I'll go with Wilder, and then I'll go with Joshua, and then I'll go with Zhang. What do you think?
I think that's my top 5 as well.
Oh, nice! I love it.
There we go.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you've predicted my question to you, Carl. Fantastic. That's all we got time for. Unfortunately, it's been another fantastic show. Thanks, as always, to Carl Frampton. Of course, Ariel, it's been a pleasure. And at last, but not least, Alex Krassyuk as well. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll catch you next time on ChatterBox.